call tonight's special meeting of the Santa Barbara Harbor Commission to order. Jeanette, would you call roll, please?
Yes, Bill Spicer.
Here.
Jim Sloan. Here. Corey Bantolin. Here. Betsy Kramer. Stephen McIntosh.
Here.
Okay. This is the public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. I don't see any of that, so we'll close that. Move to approval of the minutes.
Move. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? One abstention. Item number 2. Mr. Reedman, did you want to talk us through the reappointment?
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Spicer. Let's have Jeanette read the recommendation and then
Thank you.
Have a few words.
Reappointment of Stephen McIntosh to the Commission. Commissioner McIntosh has been appointed to serve a 4-year term expiring on December 31, 2019.
Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner McIntosh joined the Commission when longtime member Frank Kelly left, so he picked up the tail end of Frank's service. Commissioner McIntosh has served since June 2014 and is now starting a new 4-year term. He serves on the Harbor Commission Budget Committee and also the Local Coastal Program Update Committee. So we'd like to welcome Steve back to the Commission, and we really do appreciate your service on the Commission and the committee. So thank you very much.
I echo that as well. Mr. Reedman, I'm remiss. I forgot to ask if there are any changes to tonight's agenda.
Chair Spicer, no changes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move right to the director's reports.
Well, since we last met in November, the council actions included approving a 5-year lease agreement with 2 5-year options with Stephen and Sharon DeDecker doing business as the Breakwater Restaurant. They've been operating the Breakwater Restaurant since 1998, since they purchased it from Benny Plambeck. And it's a 4,000 square foot restaurant and a patio located at 107 Harbor Way. Everybody's well familiar with the site. Nice place to have lunch or breakfast and enjoy the harbor sites. Additionally, the council approved a 2-year lease agreement with 3 1-year options with Marine Services for a 490 square feet of commercial space at 117G Harbor Way, the old Transpac Marine space, for a rent of $1,200 per month. And they're right in there starting to do their tenant improvements. Additionally, the council amended the Santa Barbara Municipal Code to add a section establishing definition of vessel for craft berth moored or anchored in the harbor district. And this is another step in the efforts to keep floating boxes and things that aren't actually boats out of the harbor and keep our small harbor primarily for vessels going to sea. On December 17th, we staff convened a meeting with the Harbor Commission Budget Committee, Commissioners Sloan and McIntosh, to discuss various versions of the Waterfront Department's 6-year cash flow model. As you know, coming off the last 3 years with the good weather we've had, the department's reserves, operating and capital reserves, are at or above the required minimums, and the department is in a good position, at least at this point, depending on the kind of weather we get this winter, to pay for the final phase of the Marina One construction project in FY18 out of reserves rather than borrowing additional money at 4.5% from the Division of Boating and Waterways. Or another option that we discussed was the possibility of paying the Division of Boating and Waterways loan off on a 20-year cycle instead of 30 and saving the interest that way. So we looked at 3 or 4 different models of how we can do this, and it looks like we have our choice at this point. They look feasible, and the Budget Committee agreed that this was a good way to go rather than sit on reserves that are making 0.5 or 0.9% interest and paying 4.5% interest on loan. It would be better to throw a little bit of our reserves at that loan. And finally, tentative agendas for the February meeting are our lease with Blue Water Hunter and then our mid-year budget review. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Kramer.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Scott. And I have a question. How much savings would there be if you switched to 20 years instead of 30 years? Do you have any sense of whether it would be significant?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Kramer, we're still waiting on a new amortization schedule from Division of Boating and Waterways on what that would look like. So we have we have some rough figures. I don't have them in my head unless several million.
We looked at the annual savings.
I don't recall what they were, but and still another thing that we're waiting on an answer from Division of Boating and Waterways is possibly paying for this year's project out of reserve funds rather than waiting another 2 years. The risk there being that they interpret that as we don't need the loan anymore and we lose out on the next three, the three phases. So we don't want to overplay our cards here. So we're looking at all the alternatives.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. Great. Business Services, Mr. Bossy.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I have a brief business services report for you this evening regarding leasing activity at the waterfront and on Stearns Wharf. The amount of leasing activity in the waterfront and Stearns Wharf varies on an annual basis. Some years more than others. It's just spread out that way. The majority of our existing lessees choose to renew their leases, or when their leases are up, they like to renegotiate and enter into a new long-term agreement. That's a good sign. We have very low turnover. That generally means that business is good for them, and that turns out to be good for the city as well. In fiscal year 2016, which we're just over halfway through, there will be, or have been, depending on how you look at it, 10 leases coming before the Harbor Commission. 5 of those have already been approved by the Harbor Commission as well as City Council. Mr. Reedman mentioned a few of those. And tonight there will be 3 additional leases before you. So after that, we'll have 2 remaining leases spread out over the next couple of months. Now, in fiscal year 17, which begins on July 1st of 2016, it's a little bit different. We've got 12 leases up for negotiation and execution. However, 8 of these leases all expire on the same day, and they're all out on Stearns Wharf. It's just kind of how things worked out. So instead of coming to you in one night and having to listen to me 8 different times on leases, we're going to spread that out over a few months. Kind of keep your excitement going from month to month at the Harbor Commission. So we're gonna take those on, spread them out over the year, and get those all done as well. But basically, this is just to let you know what's coming up, and then really what's coming up in fiscal year 2017. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And you'll likely see some of those first leases that aren't due until fiscal year 17 coming in late spring and early summer.
Any questions for Mr. Bossy? Sir.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So with all these leases coming up, is there anything that we're adding to the lease agreements that, either the city attorney or something that we want to have in there, since now is a good opportunity to do that?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, that's a great question. From time to time, we do have new requirements that either the city attorney has come up with as standards for all of the city leases, not only here at the waterfront, but at the airport as well. Other times it's insurance requirements, because those vary and tend to get more stringent over time. But off the top of my head, nothing major really comes to mind with any of these leases. But we do, when we prepare these, we're always in contact with our city attorney. They're reviewing everything before it even goes to the tenant. So anything that pops up, we're sure to catch and we'll add into there.
Is there anything that we might want to do to one of these buildings or something like that should be either notify these tenants that we might be thinking about this type of work, or something? I know we're thinking some ADA work, elevators, stuff like that. Be applicable to the lease? I don't know.
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, that's another great question, and we'll look into that, especially with all of these coming up. The last few years, it's been pretty thin. I think last fiscal year was maybe 4 or 6 leases. So now's the time for us to start to dig in and really review our leases. So if there is something, we'll make you aware. And if it's something large or that could change how our tenant feels, we'll definitely let them know. And we try and let them know about every little change, because a lot of it is the same. But for example, some of these leases tonight have new insurance requirements because it's been 10 years since they've had their last lease. So things like that kind of creep up. So we'll keep an eye out for that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Sloan, I know we've had discussions about elevators and ADA, which you're referring to, and that would affect the Old Wharf Trading Company on Stearns Wharf and the Conway Wine Tasting Room above it.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
we've had some.
Conway's not on there, but I did see.
Yeah, and that's they're not up for renewal, but
Right.
it would impact possibly some of the views and things from those tenants, and so that would definitely have to be part of the discussion. We have conceptual drawings, but that's a long way from
Right,
getting
right.
an elevator in there. So
And I know you're good about, keeping them informed of it, but it could affect their business, and it might be something to look at. Thanks.
Okay. Brian, I had one quick question. The protocol for us, if any of these leases lapse before we've got the new agreement, what's the protocol?
Chair Spicer, the protocol, we'll keep them on a month-to-month.
And they know this. I mean, they anticipate this as well.
Yes, and so for this particular process, with there being so many of those bottlenecked at the end, and with all of our leases, we try to get those ahead of time and have you at least, at a minimum, the Harbor Commission approve them and either get it pretty close or ahead of time as far as City Council. So we like to get them ahead of time as much as possible.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Facilities report, Mr. Triberg.
Good evening, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. The Corps of Engineers fall cycle dredging was completed on December 13th. The new dredge contractor, Pacific Dredge, recently made some significant upgrades to the dredge La Encina that was previously owned by AIS. They removed 121,500 cubic yards in 7 days. That's an average of about 18,000 cubic yards a day, which, believe it or not, is a 50% increase in productivity over what they did in the past. So it's remarkable what they've done, and it really has made a huge difference on how quickly they can get in and finish the job. With that said, the 120,000 cubic yards is a limit by the Corps' contract for this 3-year contract. This is some post-dredge imagery. You may not be able to tell from it, but there's about 40,000 cubic yards of sand that wasn't removed because of the limits of the contract. Scott is going down to the CMAINT conference next week, and we'll be meeting with the Corps of Engineers and others, and we've discussed lobbying to get them to restore the dredge contract limits back up to 150,000 cubic yards per cycle, which we need to do. There's 2 primary benefits to dredging. A lot of people just think about the opening up and widening and deepening the channel for vessel traffic, but the other primary benefit is to the beach nourishment. So this is the discharge location. Right in the foreground was the old edge of the beach, and after they finished dredging for a week, that's how much the beach builds out. And we had some very large swells last week and a couple of weeks prior to that, and there had been some pretty significant shore erosion. But at the discharge point, there's no erosion or very minor erosion at all. Just up coast of it, there was really severe erosion. This dredge pipe was completely buried. You couldn't see it was there. It's all the way back to the ice plant again. It just demonstrates the need and the importance of continued dredging. Fortunately, the spring cycle dredging might start sooner than we normally have it start. The Corps' funding is secure, and Pacific Dredge is all set up and ready to go kind of at a moment's notice. So we'll monitor the shoreline, monitor the waves, and monitor how much sand is deposited in the channel, and we may get started earlier this year. My other project this evening is Marina One replacement project. Believe it or not, we're on phase 6, consisting of H and I fingers. H finger is where we just started. It's the last really kind of large, bigger boat finger in Marina One. Bellingham Marine Industries is the contractor who's built all the projects so far. And although they were supposed to begin on January 4th, they were postponed for a week for those storms we had last year. And it was a good thing we did postpone because it was pretty rough down at the harbor. They began on Monday, and I'll just go through a few slides just to show how quickly these guys can work. So on Monday, they began demolition of H finger. They move the demolished docks over to the launch ramp and offload them onto West Beach and stack them up. And then by Wednesday, Marburg trucked all of those docks out. So in 3 days, the docks were completely gone, and whatever could be salvaged was salvaged. And this goes to the recycling center where they crunch up some of the concrete and use it as aggregate. Some of the steel parts they reuse, and all the wire we strip the copper from, and that kind of stuff. So we recycle as much as we can. New docks came in today, 4th day after they started. This is the main walk for H-Finger. I think they had about 5 large trucks come down from Dixon, California. Came in last night and began the offloading process at the launch ramp. Each of the docks are numbered and identified for correct installation. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together. There's must be 40 or 50 different parts there that go together, and on frames and everything else, so it's a little bit complicated. But they're all identified, and Bellingham is very efficient. They've gotten really good at putting these things together. This is what we call the subassembly component. They put together about 400-foot lengths right at the launch ramp, and then they just float each one over to H-Finger and put them all in. So by the end of the day today, this is how much had been done in 4 days' worth of work, which is truly remarkable. They're very, very quick. Next week, they'll begin roughing in utilities, mostly water and electrical. And then on next Thursday and Friday, the finger docks will come in. So by the end of next week, it's going to look like a finished product, but for the devil's in the details and all the wiring everything up. So they're making very good progress, just like last time. H-Finger has 40 35-foot slips and one 80-foot end tie, and it's one of the largest docks we have in the marina. I-Finger is a little bit smaller and going to be easier to deal with. But H-Finger has really given us quite a few challenges with respect to relocating all the vessels within Santa Barbara Harbor, which completely fills up all the transient berthing. So it's really difficult to accommodate transient boaters, including our commercial fishermen. So some of them go on the walkways. And last week, one reason why we didn't work was we knew a lot of people wanted to come in out of the anchorage because it was so rough, and it worked out for the better. And now, thank goodness, we're in a pretty mellow spell of waves and rain and everything else. So they're really making good progress. As Scott mentioned earlier, this work is funded by a loan from the Division of Boating and Waterways. The total project is about $14.5 million. This particular phase, H and I-Finger, is just about $1.5 million. We don't really expect much in the way of change orders or anything like that. It's going to be business as usual. Assuming all continues to go well, they should be done by the end of February or first week in March. And that concludes my presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Real quick, Carl, if we have another storm come, what do we do with all the boats that need to come in?
Chair Spicer, kind of like we did last week, we put them on the side ties. We could have people raft up. There's a fair amount of space where we normally don't put boats, so we do everything we can to accommodate everybody. And through 5 phases we've managed, and hopefully we'll manage through the rest of this one.
I'm sure you will. All right. Thank you. Mr. Crum in Harbor Operations, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, it seems like it's been a long time, but it was really barely over a month ago where we had our 30th annual Parade of Lights, and it was a spectacular success, starting with the Santa's Village in the afternoon and a clear and balmy evening. We had 27 boats participate. It was actually more than last year. And because we had relocated the awards party to the Veterans Building because the Maritime Museum, our usual location, was unavailable, we decided to, as they say, go big or go home. We changed the theme to a red, white, and blue holiday, and our intention was to honor our veterans, past and present, and servicemen and women nationwide. And so what happened was after the parade and the spectacular, actually, fireworks from Garden State Fireworks, we had the award ceremony at the Veterans Hall, and a lot of veterans really took this to heart. Dominique Samario, our administrative and analyst, and I had been to the Vets Building and met a lot of the veterans several times at their Wednesday breakfasts, and worked with the administrator over there, Carmen Munoz, who works for the county, to put together the awards party. And this is sort of an image that indicates how seriously they took it. These three gentlemen here, all World War II veterans. The gentleman on the right, highly decorated, that red medal he's wearing is the French Croix de Guerre, the French Medal of Honor. The gentleman on the right and the gentleman in the middle were D-Day vets. The man on the right was part of the 101st Airborne, parachuted in behind enemy lines before the Higgins boats ever arrived on the beach. The gentleman in the middle was at Omaha Beach, and the gentleman on the right was in the Pacific Theater on a merchant ship, and they're wearing the original uniforms from World War II. So we're very honored to have them there. We were able to honor them and the rest of the veterans in the group, and it was really a very special night for all who were able to attend. I just wish more folks had been there to join us for that special evening. Meanwhile, who won the Parade of Lights? Well, first place winner included Roger and Sarah Christman's Polaris. That was the powerboat you saw on the first slide. Bernard Friedman's Perseverance won the commercial fishing category. Rachel Williams' Channel Cat won the commercial other category. And Barbara Mullins' Sirocco was the sailboat winner. And Lisa Foot's Sups Up won the human-powered category, with the grand prize going to Roger Christman's Polaris. So again, many thanks as always to the dozens of sponsors who helped make this happen, including the Yacht Club, Harbor Merchants Association, Stearns Wharf Business Association, whose contributions, along with tons of restaurants and hotels and harbor businesses who contributed to the prize packages. Without them, we couldn't have had the generous packages that we were able to offer. And of course, we'd like to again to thank the veterans and the Veterans Hall and Carmen Munoz and the county for helping facilitate the awards party. On the fisheries front, I'm happy to report that after nearly a 2-month closure of our rock crab fishery, which is a $2 million a year fishery for about 15 different boats, it was reopened at the end of December. And the reason being that the animals were testing clean to levels approaching zero for their neurotoxin domoic acid. So that fishery is underway and happening again. At the Channel Islands, however, the test results have been mixed, and so we're waiting with bated breath for the go-ahead from the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the California Department of Public Health to give the island fishery the go-ahead. But this is good news in the right direction. And most of the experts I speak with believe as the El Nino phenomenon and the warm water that spawned the algae bloom in the first place begin to dissipate through the spring months, we will see the islands open and be back to business as usual in the crab fishery. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cronman? Thank you, Mick. Congratulations on another Parade of Lights. One fishery question. How far up the coast has the rock crab fisheries been closed?
Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo County, now they're both open.
Okay, but not any further north, or to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no, but the rock crab fishery itself doesn't extend much past there.
All right.
The counties to the north are Dungeness crab counties.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, on to item 7 in new business. Cruise ships. Do you want to fill us in?
Yes, item 7, cruise ship update, recommendation that the Harbor Commission receive a presentation from Visit Santa Barbara regarding the benefits of cruise ship visits to the local economy.
Chair Spicer, Commissioners, cruise ships make port calls in Santa Barbara during the non-peak business seasons between April and May, again in late September through November. Cruise ship visits during non-peak season have proven to be an important component of the local business economy, and the ship visits to continue to receive the strong support of Santa Barbara Region Chamber of Commerce, Visit Santa Barbara, and Downtown Santa Barbara. We did a brief presentation on cruise ships at the November meeting, and at the November 19th meeting, Commissioner Kramer requested information pertaining to the economic benefits of the cruise ship visits. So I invited Kathy Janega Dykes, the CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, to come address the commission, because I'm sure you're bored hearing from Brian and myself reporting on it 2 or 3 times a year. So Kathy's here tonight to bring forth the presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Commissioner Spicer, my name is Kathy Dykes. I'm CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, and I'm pleased to be here today to give you some of the details of research that we conducted on the cruise ship industry to Santa Barbara, as well as anecdotal information that's been gathered on the economic impact of the industry in Santa Barbara. And as you know, the initiative to bring cruise ships to Santa Barbara was really a cooperative effort organized at the request of City Council, specifically Councilmember Hotchkiss, during the last economic downturn. And the effort was really spearheaded by the Waterfront Department, Visit Santa Barbara, the Chamber of Commerce, and Downtown Santa Barbara. Each of these partners serves in different roles. However, this partnership among all of our agencies really demonstrates the power of collaboration, which ultimately has led to a lot of success. So we really looked at a balanced approach to our community needs, and we had 3 different strategies. One is certainly to bring the cruise ships to the city. The second is to serve the passengers effectively at our port of call. And then the third was to coordinate these cruise ships in a way that mitigates any possible disruption to our local lifestyle or the environment. And ultimately, we want these passengers to return to Santa Barbara again and again. The resulting program really accepts cruise ships from September through December and January through May. Each cruise ship request is vetted, and occasionally requests are turned away if they don't meet our needs as well. There's a very thoughtful and a very cautious evaluation. Oops, went too far. We also had a couple of economic objectives. One is to certainly give a boost to our community when it was most needed. And the second was, as I'd mentioned previously, attract cruise ship visitors back to Santa Barbara for overnight stays in our lodging properties. As I'd mentioned earlier in my comments, each of our organizations serves in different roles. And for Visit Santa Barbara, we serve as the marketing umbrella. We, in fact, are a member of an association called Cruise the West Marketing Alliance, which really works to develop new cruise ship itineraries, assists with advocacy, and most importantly, really serves as a resource to be able to answer any questions or address concerns about the industry. Each year, a member of my staff actually attends a national cruise ship show in Miami and also meets with the decision makers for these major cruise ship industries and is able to learn a little bit more about what's working and what's not working. And as you know, once we put the word out that Santa Barbara was interested in the cruise ship industry, we immediately received very positive feedback and started to see cruise ships arrive. From the beginning, it was evident that these visitors had a noticeable impact on our businesses, certainly at the harbor, on State Street, also in the Santa Ynez Valley. But it was important for us to establish more specifically what the economic value of this business was. Additionally, because we at Visit Santa Barbara's primary objective is to bring overnight visitors, we wanted to make sure that these visitors were again coming back to our destination. So to get some answers, we contracted a third-party research company, and this is a research company that we've used for other projects with Visit Santa Barbara. It was Destination Analysts, who's a well-regarded agency based out of San Francisco. And we asked them to initiate a passenger survey and an economic impact study. The survey data was actually collected from passengers as they returned from their excursions in the city. In the fall of 2013, which was when this study was conducted, our efforts to incorporate cruise ship visits to our tourism mix resulted in 11 cruise ships with a total of over 26,000 passengers. Each arrival brought significant surge in business for harbor and downtown shops, and it's estimated that about 80% of cruise ship passengers disembark. A brief survey, 14-question survey, was offered to a random selection of passengers, 837 questionnaires were completed in the fall of 2013. And I know each of you have received the complete study to review, so I will just highlight some of the top numbers. Note that the total economic impact is estimated at $1.2 million in that fall season alone, when we hosted 11 ships with a total of, again, 26,000 passengers. The largest expenditures by the cruise ship passengers were in restaurant and retail stores, where among the top purchases were clothing, followed by other miscellaneous spending, including souvenirs and things like entrance fees to museums, the zoo, and certainly wine tasting. But if we take a look at the survey, again, it was done during just the fall season, but we can also infer that all 51,000 passengers that actually traveled to Santa Barbara during 2013 generated a $2.4 million economic impact. And I think this can also be inferred that this benefit has certainly increased impressively in the last 2 years, as certainly the number of passengers has increased, and our local businesses have found different ways to work more closely with the cruise ship industry. The survey also found that passengers were first-time visitors to Santa Barbara, and of those, 41% indicated that they plan to return for another visit to Santa Barbara in the next 3 years. And the potential economic impact of this group returning to stay overnight offers the potential of another $6.2 million in economic impact, another $313,000 in city coffers. It's obviously highly desirable to lure first-time visitors back to Santa Barbara, but in fact, this study also shows that overall, more than half of the Santa Barbara cruise ship passengers are expected to return to the destination within the next 1 to 2 years. 8.4% will return more than 3 years from now, and that's certainly the reason why organizations such as mine, Visit Santa Barbara, is really supportive of the cruise ship industry. And this slide then drills down and addresses where a lot of those cruise ships are going while they're here. I'm sure you're very familiar with the hospitality desk that is set up at Cabrillo Boulevard, which is operated by the downtown Santa Barbara and Chamber of Commerce. The Cruise Ship Passenger Ambassador Program really welcomes cruise ship newcomers, and the desk is again set up right there. And our destination analyst survey found that this information service was found helpful or very helpful by nearly 80% of these passengers. We asked them for their perspective on their visit to Santa Barbara. So this desk offers a wide range of brochures, certainly telling people what to see and do in Santa Barbara, as well as the Valley. The Cruise Ship Passenger Survey also found a high level of very satisfied passengers at the end of their visit to Santa Barbara. And I know certainly I've personally heard from passengers that were very complimentary about that hospitality desk, and have said of all the ports of call that they went to during their itinerary, Santa Barbara certainly provided some of the best service. So what about the benefits for our own community? So let's take a quick look again. Each passenger spends about an average of $43 during their 4 or 5 hour visit. Cruise ships come during the non-peak season, times when we actually need the business the most, and it's really crucial for the economic growth for certainly our downtown area and surrounding areas. Retailers definitely do see a bump in sales when passengers come ashore. And not to be forgotten is certainly the publicity that's generated by the cruise ship industry. And we've observed that small businesses here working with cruise ships are given considerable exposure by the large cruise ship companies. And in fact, cruise ships are hiring many local businesses to handle group tours. For example, Princess Cruises recently contracted with 6 new companies to offer excursions for their passengers. They now promote 7 excursions in Santa Barbara and 5 in the Santa Ynez Valley, and are certainly considering more in the future. And we work really closely with the shore excursion managers to make sure that we are offering new excursions so that these passengers continue to see more diversity in Santa Barbara. And certainly we're seeing more indicators that cruise ships passengers are returning on their own to Santa Barbara vacation. Our hoteliers have mentioned that they have seen passengers return. The passengers have referenced that they have saw Santa Barbara for the first time on a cruise ship. We also have a microsite that Visit Santa Barbara created, and it's a website that's designed to encourage the passengers to come back and review that site and learn a little bit more about reasons to come back. Our image and tourism brand is also benefiting certainly from the high level of satisfaction we receive. As I'd mentioned, we've heard so many compliments from passengers about the high level of service that they receive in Santa Barbara. So I thought I would close and just read you some of the quotes from some of our local operators. And according to Teddy Drew, the trolley company and Wheel Fund Rentals, the trolley company profits 50% more, Wheel Fund profits 30% more on cruise ship days. The bike shop is filled with passengers who want to explore the city in a total local way. The trolleys drop off about 70% of their passengers downtown for shopping and dining breaks. He personally has spoken with customers and staff, and most people rave about the city and talk about making their plans to visit once again. Kate Schwab from the Downtown Association said, I know lots of retailers appreciate the ships like Coach, Banana Republic, Forever 21, and many in Paseo Nuevo. Sean Farrell of Wine Adventures, she says offhand that the cruise ships are about 40% of their total yearly revenue, comes from ships that have increased over 65% in the last 2 years. She's also said that given the current economic atmosphere, if they didn't have the cruise ship revenue, they'd be out of business. This is a small tour operator. The cruise ship program is an opportunity to reach a new audience and make additional revenue that online marketing or other types of advertising may not have generated, said Tara Jones, owner of Eat That, Shoot That, which conducts walking tours and photo tours in the Funk Zone. So all of this does provide a very strong indication that the cruise ship industry is a winner for Santa Barbara. We not only benefit from the immediate economic impact, but certainly continue to see business return to Santa Barbara again and again. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Remember, she is our guest.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for the report. It's very, very interesting, and I learned a lot from it.
Thank
So
you.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Commissioner McIntosh.
Yeah, Chair Spicer, thank you. I wanted to shout out to Mr. Hotchkiss, or Councilmember Hotchkiss, once again for kind of bringing this issue to the fore and raising it at City Council and letting the city know collectively how valuable cruise ships can be to our community, as you just demonstrated in your report. I have a real quick question for you, and it looks like Mr. Hotchkiss would like to speak.
Well, just briefly, thank you very much. I feel like a surfer who paddled out and just happened to catch the right wave, to be honest. I remember when I suggested at the first meeting we had that we might want to get more cruise ships in, the mayor said, yeah, good luck with that. She actually laughed. But I know she didn't mean that cynically. So we really were lucky. But with Kathy and the DO, they're the ones that have really made this a great success. If those folks just came ashore and didn't know what to do, it would be a disaster, and the ships would drop off. So these are the folks that really deserve the credit, and the business people have responded. I'm just delighted that I happened to think of it at the time, but as I said, it's all these folks that have made it a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
So a couple of quick questions for Mr.
Please.
Dykes. Are we at a sweet spot? Do you think the number of ships coming in is right? Should we try to draw more or reduce it? What do you think?
I think that we are at a sweet spot right now. As I'd mentioned previously, there is a very cautious and a very thoughtful approach in really evaluating each cruise ship request. And, we do, again, encourage them to arrive certainly during the fall and the winter and then the spring as well, too, and try to encourage more midweek arrivals than weekend arrivals. So I do think that we're at a very good place right now. And, that continues to change. Often we'll have requests at the beginning of the season, but we'll see cancellations later on as well, too.
Okay, and then without getting too far into it, because I realize you are our guest, I would like to know what some of the questions are, the more salient questions in the vetting process. What are you looking for in a ship that you would like to have come to Santa Barbara versus one that you might turn away?
I think a lot of it has to do with timing, and I think Scott would actually concur with that too. So I think that's probably the primary question that always arises is, are they arriving during the time when we need the business the most as well too. We work really closely with, again, a lot of the different staff of the cruise ship, and we've been very lucky. We've had a very good relationship with the industry. I'd also just like to comment on Councilmember Hotchkiss. I mean, he's giving a little bit too much credit to us. This has really been a very collaborative effort, and I serve in a number of different organizations and task force, and I think this is one of the best partnerships that I've seen, where everyone has really understood their role and has worked very collectively and collaboratively to try to make this a success. But I think we all ultimately want to do what's best for the Santa Barbara, the residents, and we understand that there is a very balanced approach to this. And I believe we are following that balance.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Commissioner Bantlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kathy, for being here. I was recently on an Alaskan cruise, and they've been doing it for years in some of those ports of call, and I think our service here rivals that, and I think your results show that. Do have one question, and I think it was probably a little bit focused to the hospitality desk that you were asking about improvements, but one of the negatives, obviously, is tendering. I think that's not going to change anytime soon. Were there any other questions asked about how we might be able to do a better job as a waterfront department, or anything that comes to mind?
When the survey actually questioned the passengers in a number of different areas, some of it had to do with hospitality, some had to do their overall perception of Santa Barbara. Did they enjoy their visit here? Did they find the city clean? Did they find the services that they need? And overwhelmingly, people had a very positive experience, and I think that's what's leading to those return visits right now. The hospitality desk, I'm always very impressed every time I'm down there watching them, respond to the passengers. I don't know if any of you have been down there recently, but it is a well-oiled machine that, basically we have a large group of people that can immediately respond to any questions. People are getting on buses. There is appropriate signage guiding people to, their respective buses to take some of these tours. But it really is extremely well run.
Thank you for that, and thank you to staff. Obviously, we haven't been doing this too long, but it feels like it's already sort of a well-oiled machine, and we have issues every now and again, wet Wednesdays, and everybody was right on that and kind of back to normal again. So just want to say thanks.
I want to say thank you as well, and I think you've grabbed the spirit, and really it is a matter of quality versus quantity, and it looks like you really are putting Santa Barbara's best foot forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we now? Item number 8. Jeanette, would you read the recommendation?
Yes, item 8, proposed lease agreement with Chandlery Yacht Sales. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Chandlery on the Breakwater, Inc. at an initial base rent of $1,541.15 per month for the 492 square foot office space located at 125 Harbor Way, Suites 4, 5, and 6.
Hold on just one moment.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As Jeanette just said, the first of 3 leases on your agenda tonight for your consideration is the Chandlery lease. The Chandlery Yacht Sales is a family-operated yacht brokerage located at 125 Harbor Way in Suites 3, 4, and 5, and occupies just shy of 500 square feet. They're located immediately across from Blue Water Hunter and on the Alley Cafe, just to get you situated. The Chandlery has been in its current location for the past 10 years, and prior to that, they operated in various locations throughout the harbor since 1946. They are the oldest J-Boat and Catalina yacht dealer on the West Coast, and they provide sales in both pre-owned and new yachts. And here is their location. They're, again, Suites 3, 4, and 5 at 125 Harbor Way. The proposed lease before you this evening is a 5-year initial lease term with 1 5-year option. The initial base rent is $1,541.15. And as is customary with most of our leases in the harbor and the waterfront, they do receive a cost of living increase based on the Consumer Price Index on an annual basis. Chandlery is also on a percentage rent program that varies depending on the type of sales activity, and it's consistent with the other yacht brokers in the waterfront area. They are a tenant in good standing. They're a fixture down at the harbor, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I should also note that Mr. Keating is in the crowd this evening, so that's the big crowd this evening. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. I was going to actually invite Mr. Keating to speak if he wanted to, but it's completely optional. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Bossy on this one? Okay. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or nays? Very good. Passes. Item number 9.
Item 9, proposed lease agreement with Ocean Air. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with 1 5-year option with John Payne, doing business as Ocean Air, at an initial base rent of $1,200 per month for the 339 square foot lease space located at 125 Harbor Way, Suite 7.
Sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. John Payne has operated Ocean Air since July of 2015, so pretty recently here, when he assumed ownership of the business, and that was brought before the Harbor Commission and was approved by your commission as well. The previous owner had owned and operated Ocean Air for 29 years, so it's, again, quite a fixture in the harbor and the waterfront. The site is comprised of about 339 square feet. It's a small space here, located exactly on the opposite side of the Chandlery. This is John and the Ocean Air team, and I just want to let you know, if you haven't stopped by already, you really should. John and his staff have done a remarkable job of improving the space. They have redone it from top to bottom. As you can see, you've got a wonderful display area for all the high-tech equipment that is extremely useful on boats. He's got a great crew working for him, and anything that they don't have in the shop, they can get for you in a relatively quick amount of time. They pride themselves on their service as well as what they provide to the harbor. So with these improvements, again, top to bottom floor, new display cases, new desks, the whole shebang, that's really made a huge improvement, and it's a great improvement for the harbor community as a whole. The proposed lease terms are a 5-year initial lease term with 1 5-year option. The initial lease rate is $1,200 per month, and this particular lease rate is not a percentage rent, and that's similar to other businesses like Ocean Air, including the recently approved Marine Services lease. It is also subject to cost of living increases based on the Consumer Price Index. And the use is limited to sales and service of marine motors, electronics, rigging services, hardware, as well as some ancillary things such as painting, stenciling, and smaller items like that. So that is the end of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I should also note that Mr. Payne is in the audience if you care to hear from him or if he cares to speak.
Very good, thank you. And Mr. Payne, did you want to speak?
Well, I was going to say, come down to the showroom and check out all the new improvements, but I don't even have the slides these guys have. So second one, what Mr. Bossi said. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Commissioner Kramer, you had a question.
And I'd second the improvements. I happened to be invited in yesterday to get a tour of it. It's amazing the work that's done. It's really an incredible place, John. Thank you for all that work, and I'd encourage non-boaters such as myself to stop by too. So thank you.
Commissioner Sloan.
I just have a quick question. I noticed it says Marine Motors. Is there any conflict with Marine Services? Because I know they're going to do something similar.
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, we don't anticipate any conflict. I think with Marine Services, that is their primary focus. For Mr. Payne, it's one of his primary, but not as it is for Marine Services. So we don't anticipate a conflict there. We do try to control that type of situation and make sure everybody has the ability to succeed.
Yeah, by brand or something.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, and just to add to that, that part of the permitted use clause of the lease is a carryover from the previous lease with Doug Chesmore. And again, he had the ability to sell and service marine motors and electronics, obviously, but electronics was the focus, and he, to my knowledge, rarely, if ever, did anything with selling or servicing of marine motors. But we left that part in the lease.
Commissioner McIntosh.
Mr. Bossi, real quick, I have noticed in these two leases, this with Mr. Payne and then with Mr. Keating's lease, they have 1 5-year option each. And the lease that we approved last month for the Breakwater Restaurant had 2 5-year options. Is there something that determines what the options look like, how many they get, how many 5-year options? Is it up to the owner to negotiate that with you? Do you guys put your foot down and say 1 year or 1 5-year option, or how does that work?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, typically in the smaller leases, well, and typically in all of our leases, we do end in 5-year increments. And so we'll do an office lease for 5 years, a retail lease for 5 and 5. But restaurants are our most significant revenue generators. They have the most that they have to amortize in terms of their investment and so forth. So typically a restaurant, the fuel dock, something like Skip Abed's operation, the Santa Barbara Sailing Center, will do more like 10 to 15, at least 2 to 3 5-year options on those larger leases.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Yeah. Commissioner Kramer, would you like to advance the motion?
Yeah, I move to accept the recommendation.
Okay, a second? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Very good. Congratulations. Final item for tonight, number 10. Mr. Jeanette, would you read the recommendation?
For item 10, proposed lease agreement with Harbor Mail Center. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 2-year lease agreement with Jacques Bertrand and David Viazana, doing business as Harbor Mail Center, at an initial base rent of $468.75 per month for the 140 square foot lease space located at 125 Harbor Way, Suite 6.
Right. Mr. Bossi, can you enlighten us?
Commissioners, I am here tonight, again, as Jeanette just said. This is the Harbor Mail Center lease, one of our smallest spaces at 140 square feet, located immediately adjacent to Ocean Air. And as I look at this, we pretty much tonight, if approved, will wrap up the downstairs of the western side of 125 Harbor Way. The Harbor Mail Center is specifically identified in Appendix E of your Harbor Master Plan as an ocean-related use. It provides a very important service for many of our boaters, our liveaboards, and just people passing through the area, whether they be tourists or otherwise. It currently has about 180 post office boxes, and plenty of folks do receive their mail there on a regular basis. So again, a very important component of our harbor and waterfront community. The proposed lease before you this evening is a 2-year lease term. The initial rate is at $468.75. And again, similar to all our other leases, it has a cost of living increase based on the Consumer Price Index. You'll notice, based on Commissioner McIntosh's question, this is a 2-year lease term, definitely a shorter lease term than we're used to. The purpose of this is to monitor the lease over the next 2 years. There is a new owner that has been put on, along with Mr. Bertrand. He's been working there for quite some time, so we'd like to see how this works out, fleshes out over the next 2 years. Again, we'll be able to monitor the lease, see how they're doing over there. We're hoping to see some improvements with the facility, as it is in need of some, and we'll do whatever we can do to help. And at the end of this process, or prior to the expiration of that 2 years, we'll see how it's going, and if they're not living up to what is appropriate for a waterfront community, and at this point they're doing their job, we might entertain the idea of going out to a request for proposal process at that point in time. But it kind of leaves us that option. And with the mail industry, as you know, it's always changing with email and all the other opportunities to send things. It's really an industry in flux at this point, and so we'd like to see how this works out over the next 2 years and go from there. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Commissioner Sloan.
So I noticed that you mentioned that you don't say they're a tenant in good standing. Was that an oversight, or is there an issue with them right now?
No, I'm sorry. That's an error on my part. They are a tenant in good standing. They pay their rent on time. They're fine. Sorry, I did not put that in there. My bad.
And then I had a real quick, you can get not only just mail, but packages, the whole thing. That's where, if you're a liveaboard, this is primarily where you get your mail packages.
That is correct.
Okay.
If in fact you have a box there, yes, you can have packages dropped off there and things.
Okay. Commissioner McIntosh.
Yes, Mr. Bossi, one quick question. Looks like there's 180 boxes in that space. Are they at capacity? Are they all being used? Do you know? Or do they have a declining client base?
Commissioner McIntosh, my understanding is that they are at capacity, and I think just being that Jacques been there for quite some time and is known in the community, I think even for folks who might leave for a number of years, he does hold their mail on occasion. So it's not only folks that have the boxes, that they subscribe to those boxes and pay for those boxes, it's others as well. So it is definitely one of those community mail centers. But again, we're looking to see some improvements with that and possibly expansion of boxes. We do think there's some space in there, and we'll see what we can do and work with them to make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? All right. I'd entertain a motion. Okay. We have a first and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Abstentions? Nays? Very good. Passes. Mr. Riebman, any communications?
Nothing from staff tonight, Mr. Chair.
Council, anything of note? Okay. Unless I get objection, I'll call this closed for tonight. Thank you very much.